So let's start with Aston Martin and how its design is relevant in the modern era. I guess this is relevant to how in 2010s how AJ Newey. So I guess both of us discussed in previous shows that how similar the rear side of the Aston Martin looked for the 2010 Red Bull, because the way it looked, the downforce, the combustion, and how the air was focused on the rear to give it high-speed cornering power, all of that we saw in the 2010 Red Bulls. The FIA mandated that you can't do that anymore, so they take out the diffusers to make it possible.
Yeah, double diffuser.
Yeah, but that was the brown GB, not double diffuser. It was a single diffuser with exhaustion over there, so it was giving a lot more downforce than possible. So imagine it was basically ground effect before ground effect was a thing for the F1. Yeah. So in the ground effect era, AJ Newey did the same thing again with the Red Bull, but instead it was much more subtle. It wasn't so aggressive. So this one reminds me of that car of 2010. And it's actually very relevant and why AJ Newey did that, because in 2010, yes, the Renault engine wasn't torquey enough, and it was actually inconsistent in its torque and its speeds. So the engine performance was a bit of a handbag for Red Bull. So what AJ Newey did was that to contract with the engine imbalances, he made sure the car will be very pointy but stable from the high-speed corners. So that's why that design is relevant. It's interesting to see that what Mclaren is doing now, because they went with much more complex front suspension. Because don't forget, last year, this suspension is very similar to last year's suspension. And I thought that's kind of useless, right? Why would you go with the old suspension? Because it'll be quite heavy and highly complex than you need. But then I thought, like, what Christian Horner was saying, right? That it was such a big advantage that McLaren have with front suspension, and FI needs to regulate it, but FI didn't regulate anything with front suspension. And this is the advantage that McLaren had. The front tire can grain much more harder than the rears, especially with these new regulations. So what McLaren did was that they knew the Mercedes engine has a lot of raw speed, so it makes it a bit of unstable. So if you introduce suspension-based mechanical stability, you contract the engine's troubles. So engines can actually tell us a lot what philosophy went through this aerodynamic and suspension design. With AJ Newey, now we know that the Honda engine may have suffered some torque issues with inconsistent torques. Hence, they had to go focus on the rear so much, and AJ Newey designed it that much. So that should us a bit of clues on what the Honda.
But it seems like McLaren is more worried about the bite of the front, the bite of the front tires. Which is what gives Norris a problem, though, because he loses a feel for the car. But it's interesting because both of them are dealing with torque, but AJ Newey is more rear-oriented than the McLaren. But he has less complexity in the front, which gives it a little bit more pointiness than what McLaren has, because the McLaren doesn't want us to commit to having pointiness, and that's ultimately super more high aerodynamic speed, straight line speed based on aerodynamics. Maybe they think that the power of the engine is enough, but also they're countering it in the front. So it's different that they have different philosophies. What do you think?